Hello, I'm Graham and I hope everyone's having a great day. Welcome to part 8 in this video tutorial series for users of the Panasonic Lumix FZ80 or 82 bridge camera. In today's video we're going to look at some accessories you might want to look at in order to improve your photography or improve your creativity with the FZ82. Got quite a few to look at, so let's make an immediate start and have a look what we have here. Well, quite a few of you have noticed on the back of the FZ82 that I've got a rubber eyepiece. Now, as you know, the camera comes with just the plain plastic surround, and that is rather uncomfortable if you're going to use the camera with the EVF held up to your eye, especially if you're a spectacle wearer. You may remember on the FZ200 that I fixed a DK20 Nikon rubber eyepiece at the recommendation of one other subscriber. So I've done exactly the same thing with this particular camera. Now this is the DK20 eyepiece. It's made for one of the little Nikon cameras, and it normally clips over a slot on the eyepiece. But if you use double-sided tape, or as I've done here, I've used some super glue to bond that eyepiece to the frame of the EVF. And it does mean you've got a nice soft eye cut similar to what you've got on the FZ300. It excludes a lot more light if you're using glasses and is a lot more comfortable when you're using this up to your eye. So that's my first recommendation. The DK20 rubber eyepiece, either use two small pieces of double-sided tape to stick it onto the EVF, or as a more permanent fixture use some super glue or hot glue if you like, just to bond that to the EVF, and you'll find that is an extremely good modification to make. So that's the first one, the DK20 eyepiece. Now I'm going to put links to all these in the ebook that I've produced for this series. As soon as I've updated that, all the part numbers and links to Amazon, which are affiliate links, they won't cost you any more, but they do earn me a little bit of commission for including those. So I'll put those links in the ebook rather than fill up the comment section of the video. Now the next one I want to look at is lens care. Now the FZ80 only comes with a lens cap. You don't get a lens hood the same as you get with the FZ200 or FZ330. Now part of that reason is probably because this is a wide angle lens. It's about 20mm effective focal length. So to get a lens hood which doesn't vignette and still performs a useful function at the wide angle is quite difficult. Now normally people recommend you use a UV filter to protect the lens. Now I have a UV filter here and they just screw onto the front of the lens. Now there's nothing wrong with that, and it does add a little bit of extra protection for that lens, but my argument about this is the fact that you're adding two more air glass surfaces, and that causes you internal reflections and ghosting if you're using this towards the light. Also, when you're at the 20mm position, any dust on the surface of this filter actually can show up in the image. Especially again if you're pointing it towards the light. So unless you're working in sandy or salty sea spray conditions, I wouldn't really recommend that you use a UV filter on the front of the lens. It's better if you use just a microfiber cloth just to keep that lens surface clean. If you think you've got a fingerprint on there, again just a circular motion to clean up any dust or fingerprints off the lens. An even better solution is to get yourself a lens pen. Now these pens are ideal because they do have an impregnated tip, and once you put the cap back on the pen it transfers some new medium to the tip, and again if you use a scrolling motion like this on the lens it will take off any fingerprints and dust and leave you with a spectacularly clean lens. So a lens pen is what I recommend. If you do happen to have sand or grit on there, obviously before you rub that you use the included camel hair brush. Again just brush gently around the surface of the lens before you use the applicator to clean the lens itself. So that is the microfiber cloth and a lens pen. Again, good useful additions to put in your camera bag. Moving on to the lens hood itself, I always tend to use a lens hood. Now it gives extra protection to the lens. Once you screw this in place, then if the camera's swinging around on a strap around your neck, you've got some physical protection to the lens itself. Now this one is a 55mm wide angle hood. It does slightly vignette at the 20mm position. At 22mm that vignetting is gone, and that's at the 4:3 aspect ratio. If you're using the 16:9, then it really isn't an issue. So if you're using this for video and want a wide angle shot with a little bit of extra shade, then this particular lens hood is ideal. And again, I'll put links to that in the ebook. Once you start to go beyond sort of 50, 100mm, then this wide angle hood isn't really effective for preventing light that's coming at an angle and causing that loss of contrast or extra flare in the lens. And in that case, if I'm using this lens with more than say 50 or 100mm, say I want to using it for the full telephoto setting at 1200mm effective focal length, I've got this adapter now which I screw onto the front face of this. It has a 77mm filter thread there, so I've got an old lens hood here which I now screw into the front of that 55mm wide angle, and that gives me that nice deep hood that you need for the long telephoto shots. It prevents sun from penetrating into the lens and causing you that loss of contrast or even internal reflections. So on a long shot, I will screw this on to give me the best possible image I can from the camera. So those are lens hoods that you might want to consider with the camera. While we're talking about lenses, let's talk about some of the filters that you might want to purchase. Normally the first filter you want to use if you're a videographer is a variable ND filter. Now I've got one here. It's one that's a 62mm filter, so I adapt it up from the 55mm to 62. It saves me having to buy a range of variable ND filters for all the cameras I use. So the fact that this is adapted from 55 to 62 is no matter. Again, these just screw onto the front of the camera, and then you can vary the amount of attenuation from that ND filter to get you the right shutter speed, which is equal to twice the frame rate if you want to get those cinematic looks in your video. Especially if you want to use this at wide angle settings and you want to get that f2.8 look, then you do need the ND filter to reduce the amount of light that's coming into the camera. Again, useful for those long exposure shots. If you didn't want to use a variable ND filter, of course you can get the fixed values, ND2, 48, 64, etc. Depending on just how much attenuation you want to have to the light. Now the next filter you might want to consider is the circular polarizing filter. Now the circular polarizing filter was developed to overcome a problem with the autofocus system on DSLRs. When we used linear polarizing filters, you found that the autofocus system wouldn't work, so the circular polarizer was brought out to overcome those autofocus systems. Now with these cameras that don't have that same sort of focus system, you can actually still use linear polarizers, and in fact they reduce the light far less than you do with a circular polarizing filter, so you might want to consider linear or circular polarizing filters. Both have the effect of being able to reduce reflections from water or foliage and darken skies if that's the sort of look that you want. So again, they will only work when the light is 90 degrees to your axis of the cameras, and that's the best cut that the circular polarizer will give you. So for reducing reflections or reducing reflections on foliage, they're an ideal solution. But normally you don't see in a polarized light situation, so sometimes it gives you an artificial look. But if you do want to cut through the reflections on water, then these are an ideal solution. Now you're normally going to be using more than one memory card with your camera for redundancy purposes. You don't want to be using the same card over and over again. You might want to have a couple of cards and you can cycle them through. Obviously if you're just shooting stills, you can use any class of card. It doesn't really matter. You can use some of the old class 1 cards if you still have any of those. But if you're shooting video, then the bit rate of the camera is high enough to want you to use a class 3 card. Anything more than a 10 megabits per second card will work properly. You can probably find that you can use a U1 card in some cases if that write speed is over the 10 megabytes. And the best thing to do is to put the card in the camera, shoot some 4K video and see if you get the warning that the card can't be used. I've got several U1 cards which actually work great with 4K video without any problems. So the SDXC U3 card is recommended, but I've been using for a number of years now these micro SD cards in their adapter. They're about a third of the price of the conventional SD card, and they have the same functionality as the full SD card. Okay, you've got a couple of more contacts, but they are gold plated, so you aren't going to get noise or loss of contact. And I haven't had any issues in 2 years or more that I've been using the micro SD cards in all my range of cameras. So if you want to keep your costs down, in fact, if you want to get a larger card than you would pay for the price of a smaller card, then the SDXC Micro is a good way to go. So those are the micro SD card in preference to your SD card. The other thing you're going to consider is probably a couple of batteries. The battery doesn't last any length of time if you're shooting video with this camera, so it's a good idea to buy yourself a couple of extra batteries. Now, I've been using third-party batteries ever since I started digital photography. Obviously, the OEM battery comes with the camera, and that's the one you'll use initially, but all my batteries are third-party ones. Never had any issues with leakages or overheating or explosions. That is all hype in my opinion. I've not had any personal experiences, and I've got maybe 50 or 60 third-party batteries that I use in a range of cameras and never any issues with them. These are the ones that I normally recommend. They're by DSTE. I found those to be superb batteries. A while back on my blog I did a full breakdown of these batteries. I physically took them apart and checked them for safety, whether they got overprotection for current and voltage, or whether they got thermal fuses so they wouldn't overcharge if they were left on. So you might want to look at that information on my photographic blog, and I'll put a link to that in the video description below, just in case you are scared about using third-party batteries with a camera. So these are by DSTE. Again, you get a charger which comes with these. They will charge the original Panasonic battery as well as these third-party batteries, and it has the option of mains or 12-volt power to charge your batteries externally. If you're obviously charging by the USB link, you can only charge the one battery in the camera, and that's very limiting if you're out on a field trip, as I normally do. So I'll carry 2 charged batteries plus the one in the camera, and then when one depletes, I'll use the USB charger to charge that battery up while I'm having a coffee or something like that. Talking about using USB power banks, you might want to use one of these to charge your camera while you're out and about. Get one with a 2 amp output. It does give you a better power input for the camera to be able to charge. Obviously you're going to use the micro USB connector into the side of the camera to charge the battery, and that is a useful benefit in having this as a set of a travel zoom camera. You can always find a USB power supply on a bus or a plane. You can actually charge your camera up while you're traveling, so USB charging on this device is quite a good addition. Talking about travelling, you might want to consider getting a small travel tripod. Again, this will just screw into the base of the camera, and it gives you that extra support if you wanted to use it for long time exposures, or even just giving yourself a nice sturdy base to shoot your pictures. You'll get lots more steady pictures, especially if you're going to be using this at those longer focal lengths. So a small travel tripod. This is a little Manfrotto one. There are several travel tripods like the Gorilla Pod, especially the one designed for DSLRs, which is more sturdy constructed. You might want to look at that rather than the very flimsy micro Gorilla Pod. So that is a tripod. You might even want to consider using a full-size tripod, and there are many travel tripods around. Providing you don't get one that extends too high and the legs are too thin, then this camera will give you vibration if you're in the wind and you don't want that with these long focal length shots. So a good sturdy tripod, the best you can afford is my advice. I've had the Manfrotto 190B, I've had that for about 15 years. It's still in good condition. There's no wear or tear on any of the joints. So it's better to invest early on if you're going to be using your camera for a long time, or anticipate keeping your photography hobby going for a long time. As you know, the FZ80 does not have an external audio input socket. You can't use external mics with the camera, but so that means that if you're going to record video and you want better audio, you are using an external audio recorder. Now that can be as simple as your smartphone. You can actually use your smartphone as a way of recording. You can hold it in your hand as though it was a hand mic, or keep it close to your subject if you're recording that. Or if you want to, you can use these digital recorders. I started off with this little Olympus PCM, progressed to this better quality one, and now for my serious shoots I'll use this Tascam DR40, which has got the dual stereo microphones and audio input and SLR input, so it gives me a lot more opportunity to record great audio. But there's no need to go to that expense. You can just use an ordinary dictation microphone, if you like, to get some audio that you can synchronize with your camera track and then delete your camera track to give you better audio in your final video. Now, in one video I alluded to the fact that I use a lens hood. Now, this lens hood is mated with the LCD screen on the back of the camera, and it gives you a superb view of the image that you're shooting. Now, the fact that this is a high-res viewfinder is even better than the one that I used on the FZ200, so it does give me a fantastic view of what I'm seeing. Now, to use it, you really do need to adapt the bottom of the camera to position the mounting point directly under the lens axis. The normal camera position is near to the battery box, so it does mean that if you put a tripod plate on there, you can't open the battery box. Now, this is one I made. It's a copy of the Oldo Liberator plate that I fitted to the FZ300 and the 1000. It's still available on the Oldo website, and again I'll put a link to that in the ebook if you wanted to buy them, or if you are handy at home you might just want to drill yourself a bit of aluminium plate and trap it 1/4-20 in the centre so you can mount this on a tripod. The actual method of fitting this viewfinder is that you need to use the adapter plate, which will screw onto the bottom, and then this will clip to the bottom of that adapter plate, seal itself nicely to the LCD, and then you've got a nice viewing hood that you can use up to your eye to give you that superb view. And it actually flips up, so you can actually still use your touchscreen if you wanted to. So it's a really good addition if you use this camera for video, or you want to get those long shots and you want to get absolute pinpoint sharp pictures. You can use the viewfinder to ensure you've got superb sharp pictures. Again, I'll put a link to that in the video. Now, the next thing that you might want to consider if you're shooting video is some external LED lights. Now, these come in a variety of forms and shapes, from the 32 LED matrix, these little things which will clip onto the top of the hot shoe. They're ideal if you're using them very, very close to a subject. I mean, they look intensely bright, but in fact the light output is so low that the camera needs to be about 6 inches away before you get a decent image. So you're going from 32 to 64 LED. This one's an 8x8 matrix by Godox. It's got a variable intensity again, but you're probably going to be using it at full power anyway. This has got its this particular Godox LED 64 runs from 4 AA batteries. The little 32 one works from its own lithium battery inside. But again, you'll find the light output is extremely low, and unless you're going to be just a couple of feet away from your subject, you're not going to get much coverage from these lights. So even though they look intensely bright, you'll find even at ISO 400, you're not going to be getting much of an image from these lights. So you really need to be considering something a little bit larger. This one is a dual function pack. If I turn this on, it can either be daylight, or if I turn the knob on the back, it can be 3200. In between that, you've got a mixture of daylight and 3200, but normally you would use it in daylight or 3200, and you can vary the intensity again from full power down to about 0, as you can see there. Again, it looks very bright, but the actual output isn't that great. Again, if it was mounted on camera, you need to be within a meter before this is too low powered to give you enough exposure for a decent video. If you go to the next size up, which is this 300 LED unit, this one has got barn doors on. Now, to be honest, because of the angle that the light comes out of these units, the barn doors are totally ineffective. In fact, if you point this at your light source and move the barn doors in or out, you won't see any effect on them. So on all my other lights, I've taken these things off. They're just a nuisance. They get in the way. If you're trying to mount them on top of the camera, you can't fold them down anyway. So I've taken all the barn doors off. Now again, this one is a fixed color temperature. This one is 5145 according to my light meter. If I wanted to convert it to tungsten, if I'm using it in combination with ordinary household lights, tungsten lights, then I'd slide out this diffuser and slide out the CTO orange filter, slide that in place, and that converts that 5100 to 3200, and you can use it for tungsten matching in a domestic environment. But obviously you're going to lose roughly 2/3 of a stop by using that CTO filter, so you are again reducing the amount of power from this unit. You can vary the intensity to try and get your exposure right. It's powered by a Sony NPF 550 or 950 lithium ion battery on the back, or you can put AAs in the tray, but they don't last any length of time because of the power consumption of these units. And if you really find that you are struggling getting enough light, then the next option is to use one of these larger panels. Again, this one has barn doors, totally ineffective. This one's still got the protective wrapping on. You wouldn't normally have the silver things, but this is waiting for me taking that off and taking the barn doors off. Again, it's powered by 2 batteries to give you the power that's required to run this unit. This one is a fixed color temperature, again 5400, and it's 720 the number of LEDs in this unit. Much brighter output. I've actually got 3 of these to illuminate this scene in my studio to give me the exposures I need, which is a 50th of a second f4 at ISO 320. So even with 3 of these light panels, and they're about 3 meters away from me, there's only just enough light to produce the video quality that we need for decent videos. If you are going to be using the camera for an extended period of time, then if you are going to be using it for, say, time-lapse or stop-motion animation, then you'll probably find the battery runs out before you need it to do so. So in that case, you can use these battery eliminators. Now here's one that I actually made myself. It is an old battery box which I've taken out the lithium ion battery from and just wired the 8.4 volts from the eliminator straight into the unit. That just plugs in. The side of the camera pops down so you can get the wire out from the side, like so. And then you can plug this into the mains or use a USB power bank that gives me 8.4 volts through an adapter, and then you can run this on mains for an extended period of time without fear of the battery dying while you're videoing. So those are some accessories you might want to consider using the camera, and again I'm going to put links to all those in that ebook, so you might want to have a look at them yourself. A number of you asked for some video footage from the camera, so I'm going to include just a minute's worth of video from the previous video that I shot on close-up lenses. So I was filming that using the Canon M50. At the same time I used the FZ80 as well to record that video, so I'm going to include the video footage from that without any sound, because obviously the FZ82 wasn't being used as the audio source. So I'm just going to include a minute's worth of that so you can see the quality versus the M50, and they do both stack up quite well in my opinion. Now in the final video in this series we'll be looking at the advanced features that the camera has that you might want to be looking at, and also how to use external flash with the camera, both on camera and off camera, to give you some better pictures at social occasions and events, etc. So I look forward to bringing you that in the next video. Well, that's it for this video. If you are a new viewer and like what you see, you can see all the other 7 episodes in the FZ82 playlist that's here on my YouTube channel. So until the next video, thanks very much for watching. Please do take care, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye for now.